Hey guys, Dave here from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, and today I have Jeff joining me from True Dungeon. How are you doing today, sir?
I am doing well. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I never even asked which side of the coast you on.
I am in the best side of the coast, in the middle, in
And then,
Carbondale, Illinois.
nice, neither.
Yeah,
So, what is it? Mid morning for you now?
it is 11 o'clock. Yep.
Yeah, not quite noon. So, I had not realized that you guys have been doing True Dungeon for so long. For some weird reason, I had this impression that it was like a newer thing.
Sure. Yeah, I think we've raised our profile in the last few years. That might be why we've kind of kept it on the back burner lately, or for the first dozen years or so. We were happy just being at Gen Con with the family and all. We weren't really trying to take it a lot of places. So
Yeah, for me, this year has or this past year was the first year I really got out and started getting out to cons. So that's when I started noticing and also being more engaged in the RPG community. I just saw more, I guess more advertisings and things like that. And we were talking a little bit about right on the website. One of the first things it points out this is not a LARP.
certainly. Yeah, that's one of the reasons we say that is because we don't want people to be disappointed. The event is pretty expensive for most gamers, and we want to make sure that somebody doesn't come in there and with the expectation that it's going to be an event where they assume a character and there's all these social interactions with other characters. Um, when we designed True Dungeon, I wanted to do something that tried to put you into the situation. We've all dreamed about going into a real D&D adventure, and that's what we kind of wanted to create. And I thought having to play a character is just another barrier to get you immersed. So I kind of like to sometimes refer to it as like live action immersive gaming. I guess is about the best way to describe it to a lot of people. So we really try to make the players forget about everything and just try to feel like they're actually in the dungeon or wherever they're at.
So when did the inspiration strike to do the True Dungeon for the first time?
Well, I mean, I've always been a fan of Dungeons and Dragons growing up in high school and whatever, and back in that time there were books out like Dream Park that talked about how in the future there'll be these really big interactive sci-fi type gaming locations where you can have like holographic weapons and you can go on these adventures. So it's always been something that's that an idea I've always enjoyed. I had done this little get together for friends. We live in a college town, so a lot of people come and go over the years, and I made all these friends with gamers that had come and gone. So I decided to have an annual get together. I just called it Jeff Con, short for Jeff's convention, and it was like a dozen or so friends that would come in once a year. We'd have a good time, and I'd try to put on a really good little show for them. I'd plan out all the little events, whatever. And the big highlight of the event every year was the big AD&D tournament. So to make it better and better every year, and this started in the 90s, I'd start making props, for the adventure. Like instead of telling them they found this map, I'd make a map. Instead of telling them they found a staff, I'd give them a staff that I'd make, and there'd be like a secret compartment and with a command word, that type of thing in there. And then eventually I started renting out a suite in a hotel, and I'd go in with just wood and build like rooms that they could interact with. Um, and then about 2003, a friend of mine that I helped with his booth, Dwarven Forge booth, Stefan Picorni, he was sitting in a bar with Peter Atkinson, who owned Gen Con, and they had just moved Gen Con to Indianapolis. It was about to be its first time in Indianapolis. They had all this room, and Peter was telling Stefan that he wanted to make this, cool, like large maze that people could walk through, and because they have all this room, and and Stefan said, "Well, Peter, I know this crazy guy in Carbondale that makes stuff kind of like this. It's not huge, but he'll build rooms of puzzles." So Stefan told me, "Hey, invite Peter to your next Jeff Con, and maybe you can talk, figure out something." So I did. I made these really cool scroll tubes that look really old. I put an invitation inside it, and I trapped it with a couple of those Chinese pull firecrackers. So when he opened it up, really loud explosion. It was kind of funny. I didn't, yeah. So he actually thought that was pretty cool and didn't get a restraining order or anything. And he actually ended up coming. Um, middle of nowhere out to Marion, Illinois to come to the con. He played in the tournament, had a good time. The D&D tournament, saw the room that I'd made. There was a fountain in there that they had to solve a puzzle. And when you reached across the fountain to grab this key, I had the fountain rigged with a false bottom and a glove where a hand would come up and grab you. It was really cool. I think of a cool illusion. And he was hooked. He's like, hey, I got to have something like this for Gen Con, only bigger. So we went and had pancakes at Bob Evans that morning and figured out the whole event, how it was going to run, everything. And he's like, here, I think he was like $5,000 in funding to get your props and walls and stuff made. And 5 months later, True Dungeon was up and running at Gen Con.
So one of the questions that is popping up in the chat is, what is the difference between this True Dungeon and a LARP? And we kind of talked about that a little bit before we got started.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't have a lot of quote unquote LARP experience myself. And that term probably means 12 different things to 12 different people. But for me, it means that you assume a character and you interact with other people that are playing characters. And it looks like it could be a lot of fun, if you're really into the setting. It's not something I'm really into because I'm not really that great of a actor or verbal person. So for me, when, there were LARPs around at that time, I thought I wanted to do something that was for me, which would be something that would just immerse me as much as possible. And for people that don't really enjoy the whole, LARP acting thing. So that's the reason it was designed like that.
And someone else in the chat was like, so it's a tabletop, but instead of playing at the table using minis, you are the minis is how they described it. Which is an interesting way to do it. But also like you said, LARP is more about assuming the character, where here you're going to play yourself with almost like fantasy elements kind of like overlaid on top of who you are. And you guys do that through like a token or pin system? Oh no, did we just lose your sound? Let's see.
Hello?
There, I heard something.
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
No, you cannot.
But you can't hear me apparently now. Let's see. So guys, we're doing it live, and this is
now I'm back.
All right.
I can hear you now. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, me neither. That was odd.
Sorry. After you talked for a few seconds, and I didn't hear anything else.
No worries. Like I said, we're doing it live, and that's what happens.
Yep.
I'm sure you're no stranger to that. Well,
yep.
What someone in the chat had pointed out that they were describing it to someone else, and they said essentially like a tabletop where you use minis, but in this case, you are actually the mini.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I mean, that's a good analogy. We try to make the sets as immersive as we can. We try to really transport you into a fairy forest or, a cavern filled with water or a swamp. This year, we're working on an Arctic adventure that'll premiere at Gen Con. We're going to have these really cool snow-looking walls. There'll be actual snow falling on you, and there'll be some fog that'll kind of remind you that it's chilly out, and it should be fun. Should really help immerse people in their adventure.
Oh man, it would be badass if you could rent out the ice castle.
Yeah, that would be.
So I guess with each year you guys go with a different theme.
Yeah, we try to vary them quite a bit too. Usually we'll jump from one extreme to the other. Yeah, this year they're supposed to be in a good outer plane that's somewhat Norse based. And the first one's going to be kind of an Arctic type adventure, and then the next one will be inside kind of a temple of Odin with a kind of a Viking theme. So it should be a lot of fun. Previous ones we've done are like underwater ones and caverns and fairy forests. This this year's season concludes at Origins, and one is based like in a typical medieval forest. The other one's in like the Fae, which is like a fairy maze. So yeah, they can vary quite a bit.
So is it like each season, I guess, especially now that you guys are doing multiple locations, is each season have like a theme? Is it a connected story?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, we have we have a multi-year story arc. The current one is like we plan out like 4 years at a time. We're currently in the third year of a 4-year story arc where we try to make sure all the adventures kind of link up really well. We come up with a central villain type thing and have an overall story arc. And we, and then each year we start the adventuring season at Gen Con, and it goes around the calendar. This year we're going to Gamehole Con in Madison, Wisconsin in November, then PAX South in January, and then we end at Origins in June. So at any of those 4 adventure or conventions this year, you can play the current adventures, and then we start all over again at Gen Con.
So you said PAX South, which is a little less RPG oriented.
Correct.
I would
Yep.
say. So do you guys still fill up there?
Yeah, this is the first year we've like offered an adventure. We went there last year and did a little demo, and we got an inkling that people really liked it because they were having to wait. They were capping the line at a 2-hour wait. People are willing to wait in line for 2 hours just to get a little 24-minute demo of the event. So we thought, hey, let's come back and do an adventure. And we sold out, and the response was amazing. I think there's a really good market there at all these quasi game cons that are more electronically based. I think there's a real thirst that people want to have immersive gaming. They're used to laptop stuff, or there's all this stuff about augmented reality and virtual reality where why not play the real thing in a ballroom and have a lot more fun. It's available right now. You don't have to wait 20 years. So yeah, the response was great. We sold out, and the people coming out were just blown away by the fun they had.
You could be their gateway drug to tabletopping.
Yep, there you go.
It's funny watching everyone trying to like describe it in the chat. Actually, one of the best descriptions I think that I've seen so far is it's kind of like escape rooms, but D&D themed, and you guys are doing it way before escape rooms probably even came out. So.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, that's always a good one to say to people to kind of explain it, because a lot of people have played escape rooms. Yeah, when that whole thing started like 7 or 8 years ago, it was kind of funny because it was like what we'd been doing for 7 or 8 years, and it was nice to see it kind of validated what we were doing. The nice thing about us is that you go to a new room every 12 minutes, so it's a little more built-in fun in that you move on whether or not you're successful or not. You're not. Some escape rooms, like I played one where we just could not get a puzzle, and we sat there for 40 minutes and had a horrible time. So if we were just not going to get the puzzle, then we'd be moved on after 12 minutes and get to do something different. So I like the way we do it a lot better than escape rooms.
Well, that's a good idea too. Just like even looking at your D&D game, anything that the group gets stuck on that long, it's no longer fun. It's just frustrating.
Correct.
And, yeah. So that's why it's always horrible design when you don't have another way around the problem. So
yeah,
who is writing the overarching stories and the individual stories?
That would be me. I've been doing it since I started. I'm kind of the creative dude behind the thing. I get some input from our community about like settings they'd like to experience, or monsters they'd like to fight, that kind of thing. But I'm lucky enough that I get to kind of be the guy that does it all, and it's I feel like I'm a DM for a group, of thousands of gamers that play a couple times a year. It's kind of fun.
So does each true dungeon have like a centerpiece?
By centerpiece, what do you mean exactly?
Like, you know, I was looking through some of the images, and there's like cool dragons and
Sure.
trolls and.
Yeah, I guess we try to have one iconic NPC or monster that you'll encounter that you can, you know, if you see that image, it'll remind you of the whole adventure. Um, we usually try to have the final room be kind of wowy, and you know, wow, we put a lot of the budget into that room, but not always. This year, we're doing a bunch. Our adventures are based in the world of Pat Rothfuss, Name of the Wind. I don't know if you've heard of his books or read them, but they're he's got a very passionate fan base, and I really liked him. And he's played several times and is a big fan and wanted to work together. So it was really an honor to work with him this year and come up with adventures based in his world. But the big iconic person was you ran into this year is in the first room is one of the characters from his book, Felurian, which is like this queen of the Fey world. So yeah, it can vary.
So, you know, you've been doing this for 16 years. I'm sure you have like a bunch of stories to tell from that. Do you have like a top like memorable moment from doing this?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's so many because there's some of them are based on like just the fun of meeting all the volunteers. I've met some amazing people and I've some great friends that we've developed over the years. And then stuff with for a lot of people, the True Dungeon is a weekend. For us, it's the entire year building the thing and then taking it to the show. So there's a lot of good memories there too. It's gonna sound kind of silly, but the one that always sticks to me. This was like 7 or 8 years ago. We were at the Marriott Hotel at the time, and I was just standing by the door, and I saw this old guy, like my age now, and he had just gotten out of the adventure, and he literally skipped over to the epilogue type area where you get your treasure. And the guy probably hadn't skipped in 30 years. I don't know, but to me that was it. I was done. That was like the best it's ever going to be because to make some old dude like me skip has got to be something pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, you know that is true. And I was just reading an article today with my friend Satine was interviewed by N World, and she talks a lot about play, and that's essentially what we do, right? We always talk about
Yeah.
on our channel. You know, we're adults playing make believe, essentially, playing role
Right.
playing
And
games.
yep. And it's great to be I've always been the guy that likes to like set up the party or set up the what are we going to do tonight kind of thing. That's why I did Jeff Con. I just love putting on an event for people, and so be able to do it large scale with True Dungeon is just like the best thing for me. It's just I just think it's great to be able to make fun for other folks. Just that's fun for me.
Do you still do Jeff Con?
I haven't done it in the last year. There was we moved and there were some other issues, but we're gonna do it sometime this year. But yeah, no, we've done it since last year was the only time we haven't done it, but it's gonna happen again.
I think it's really impressive that essentially the way you described it, to me, it sounds like this all sprung from you wanting to do basically a reunion every year for your gaming group, and it kind of like everything kind of grew out of that. I don't know if that sounds accurate or not, or if we lost sound again. Yeah, I can hear you, but apparently you can't hear me still. So, guys, if you have questions in the chat, remember just put question before it so we can pick them out easier as we wait for Jeff to figure out his sound. Gotcha. And I just heard a click. So I'm getting sound from you. I can hear you, but you can't hear me.
Well, apparently you can hear me, but I cannot hear you. So
Huh,
I don't
that's
know
really weird. Although just the volume just changed.
why
So
this is happening.
can you hear me now? I'm going to take that as a negative. This is a first. Usually it just all out works or doesn't work. Gonna have to start using smoke signals.
Let me see if I can get this figured out.
So Mind Milk's asking for DMs running tabletop sessions. What kind of props would you recommend?
Can you hear me now? I can't
Yep.
hear you though.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened.
I can totally hear you.
It's working fine.
And let's see.
I'm just gonna reload, I guess.
Okay, try that. I will be here waiting. So, all right. As we wait for Jeff, we'll see what happens, guys. And Mind Milk D20. What kind of props would you recommend scaling up the most impact? You mentioned making his staff. So until he gets back, I guess we can talk about that a little bit. And really, I don't think over the years we've done a whole lot in our own personal games with props. Occasionally, someone would make a map to hand out and burn the edges and rough it up and stuff. I can hear you. Yes.
If you can hear me, go thumbs up.
Yes, we are.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
We're halfway there.
This. Can you talk? I don't hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. Well, I think I'm just gonna have to do this. Is this okay?
Yeah. Can you? As long as you can hear me, it's fine.
Okay. I apologize, everybody. I don't know what happened. It worked fine. So thank you for your patience.
No worries, man. If this is the worst thing that happens to us today, we're doing good.
Great. I got the door locked, so we should be okay.
So we did get a question while you're away, and this is a way better question for you than me because you've done it. For DMs running tabletop sessions, what kind of props would you recommend for scaling up for the most impact? You mentioned making a staff.
Yeah, best thing to do is to go to like Hobby Lobby. I don't know if you got one near you, but they usually have like this corridor full of like half broken crap that nobody wants, that they're selling like 90% off. Best place to go ever. This stuff's really cheap, and you can get these really crazy, weird things that nobody wants. But you can look at this item, like you might see this statue of some kind of golden goat head. And for $1, you buy it, you take it back, and you can create an entire adventure around it. You might even be able to think of some puzzle that you could do with it. But that's like a great spot to find really cool, weird items that are, something that like at yard sale prices. So if you've got a Hobby Lobby, I would recommend that.
There you go. There's a pro tip for you. So I was saying when you had cut out.
Now I'm back.
Now you're back. I was saying
now this works.
Perfect.
Crazy.
I was saying that to me it sounds like this whole thing, True Dungeon, this thing's been going on for over a decade and a half now, really sprung up from you wanting to do a reunion with your gaming group.
Yeah, I wanted to. Yeah, we'd done it for several years, and then I just wanted to make the D&D adventures more and more fun. So I found a stick once out on a walk that we called it a beaver stick because it was like sassafras, and he had gotten it and eaten all the bark off of it and left it floating in the water, and it had all these really cool teeth marks in it. So I thought it just looked really cool and magical, Hey, and so I stained it and did all this stuff, drilled a hole in it. Put like a false gem on it. So if you pulled the gem off, there was a little tube inside with a scroll that said the command word, and it was a staff of healing. So if they figured all that out, they'd be able to heal their characters during the adventure or some. So it was a way to. It's just a cool little prop. I've done. Probably the first thing I ever did at a Jeff Con type thing that was a prop was I just got a rabbit skin and drew a map, a real crude map that was supposedly that they found as the adventuring hook. Then I put some weird scratch marks on it, and if you took the rabbit skin and kind of folded it the right way, they would kind of link up and they'd spell a message. It was like the secret message to tell you how to get into the cave, that kind of thing. So little stuff like that you can do on your own, and that really added an extra element to your games, I think.
That is actually really cool too. Like how you're just like, here's a stick, and someone else just walks by, and you're like, I see a magic staff that I'm going to now put into a game.
Yeah, it's been yeah, I always just keep my eyes open. You never know where you're gonna see something, some kind of prop that you could turn into a really cool puzzle centerpiece or a really cool encounter idea. Some of the best puzzles are just ones and prop pieces. They're just ones that I just find by accident. Just walking around. Roll King's a great place to see a lot of weird stuff you don't see anywhere else. You go there and you can find some crazy stuff and come up with a puzzle idea from it. Or like Hobby Lobby is another place that's just a great gold mine of ideas. Just because it's weird stuff you'll never see anywhere else, and you can see it online, you can see it in the catalog, but you can hold it and look at it. You can really get some pretty cool ideas.
I remember one of the first times that I heard about True Dungeon. I think it was probably Origins with my friend Doug, who runs our website for us now. And he was like, "Yeah, we seen this the first time at Gen Con, and we were like, oh, this looks really cool." So him and his group of friends went up to the desk because they wanted to check it out. And he's like, the person running the desk just started laughing at us because they're like, "This thing sold out 5 minutes after after the tickets went live." He's like, "Oh."
Yeah, we've been lucky. We've had great support over the years. We usually, like last year, we sold out 8,000 tickets in like 40 minutes, as fast as basically the computer would handle it. We should be charging a lot more money. People tell me you should never sell out. You should always whatever. I mean, I think we charge plenty. I'm having a great time. I've got all the funding we need to have these really cool events, and I'm happy with it. But it's a little frustrating sometimes when you meet these people that are from I'm from Australia. This is the only year I'm going to be at Gen Con. I want to play. Can you get me in? I'm like, not really. Sorry. Maybe you can find somebody that's got tickets. We've got a great forum that people get on and try to find players that have tickets. But yeah, that can be a little frustrating sometimes when people really, really want to play. When we first year we did it, it was such a last minute thing that we weren't even in Gen Con's ticketing system. They were flexible enough that they just said, "Hey, just sell your own tickets. We trust you, and just do it yourself." And so we printed up these wooden nickels that had our logo on one side and the other side was blank, and then we just hand wrote in the day and the time, because you don't want to sell paper tickets. You want to have cool wooden nickel type tickets. And so you couldn't buy them in advance. And people would queue up in the morning. And the first time I knew that I think we had a hit was that second day. We got there Friday morning, came around the corner, and there was like 300 people in line at 8 o'clock in the morning to buy tickets for that day, because when we sold them that day, that's when I knew, I think, that we had something there.
Did you find that a little humbling to for you to do this thing for the first time with this venue, and just see that many people waiting to do the thing you made?
It was awesome. I won't lie to you. It was, that's what I love to do, is make fun for other folks. And when I see that they're going to be there and they really like it, it's a validation that, hey, what I'm doing, they're having a good time. So seeing it sell out every year at Gen Con is really nice. And, it's just motivates me. That's what's been keeping me going for 16 years doing this like crazy. Is just all the fun that I see folks have.
So you mentioned the cost not being that much. So what is the cost to do one of the sessions?
Well, the cost is actually quite a bit. It depends on the con you go to, because more cons have more expenses than others. If you go to like one of the smaller cons like Origins or Gamehole Con, that kind of, I think last year they were $38 a ticket. But at Gen Con last year they were $62 a ticket, and we sold out 8,000 of them in as fast as we possibly could, pretty much. So.
Yeah, and how many rooms does the dungeon typically hold?
There is a coaching room where you spend 24 minutes with a coach. It's kind of a theme, kind of medieval tavern type feel, or inn. And then they get you ready and they move you into the training room, which is themed too. And that's where you practice your class skills. So if you're a fighter type, you practice the shuffleboard system. If you're a thief, you're practicing how to disarm a trap and that kind of thing. And then after that, you go into 7 adventure rooms. So the whole thing takes 2 hours. It's a 2-hour. I picked like the typical length of a movie. And thought, well, I'll make it a 2-hour type thing. It'll feel like a movie. And so that's how it works.
So can you take people through it through like the experience a little bit, so they can understand True Dungeon? Because I actually I'm kind of surprised that there's people that haven't heard about it, but there's people in the chat going, "Hey, thanks for doing this. I've never heard of this."
Yeah, it's what's the best way to do it? I think an escape room is kind of interesting analogy when they came along. Somewhat, what we wanted to do was, I think the most fun I would possibly have is to go on like a real D&D adventure, and so that's what we try to do. We start you out with a party, and everybody gets a bag of these tokens. There's 10 tokens. They're random, and they represent your gear. So everybody just randomly opens them, and the first bit of party fun is you basically redistribute your tokens to try to max out your party. So if you're playing the wizard and you get some plate armor, you're going to give it to the fighter or the cleric, and they'll give you a scroll of healing or something. That's how it kind of works out. So that's a big. So and that also gets people working together. They may not know each other. It's a good icebreaker where they just divvy up their tokens and equip the party. The coach that's in there will answer questions. And then towards the end, you kind of figure out what your starting equipment is. Like the classic RPG thing is, mini-maxing your character with your equipment. So we have these placemats where you kind of put your tokens down, and it helps you organize what your character has. Once that's done, then the coach answers any other questions you might have about how the whole thing works. You get to go into the training room. Everybody has like a class skill. Some of them are fighter types. We use a shuffleboard type system to do combat. Sounds kind of cheesy when you say shuffleboard. It's for old people in Florida, but it's also a really cool combat system because it takes hand and eye coordination, and there's a lot of strategy because you can bump somebody who has missed. You could bump them into like a critical hit if you're good at it. They may have a better weapon, so you want, instead of you trying to go for the 20, you want to bump the barbarian's two-handed axe into the 20 if you can. Plus it kind of simulates the real fight, where if you're attacking a monster, with 10 people, and the barbarian swings, he's going to jump out of your way and might jump into the swing of the fighter. So it's a pretty cool way of doing it. And if you're a spellcaster type, you've got a specific class skill. Like if you're a druid, you have to memorize the silhouette of these like 12 different leaves, or magic users have a planar chart, but they have to memorize where all the names of the planes are. Clerics have to memorize prayer beads. So during your adventure, if you, for instance, you're a cleric and you want to heal somebody, you get bonus healing if you can name a random prayer bead that the DM asks you. So you might say, what's the prayer bead of like love? If you can show that to them, you do like +3 to your healing. Or if you're a magic user and you know where the plane of fire is on the chart, you do +3 damage. Or same thing with the cleric or the druid. If you know what a sassafras leaf looks like, then you'll do extra damage or healing. So, and for the rogues, they've got a unique thing where they can we've got these cool operation game type things where it's a metal maze with a metal stylus that's lit up, and you have to go through the entire thing. If you get to the end without touching the edges, you get to open the chest, and inside the chest is tokens. You can grab a random token if you want to be a greedy thief or rogue, or if you want to help the party, you can reach in and you can read the clue that's inside. So it's the classic rogue dilemma. Do I help the party or do I steal an item there while they're not looking? So that's always fun. A few times in the past, they've had a bigger choice where they've got like a t-shirt instead of the token, where it said like, I screwed my party for this t-shirt. It's kind of funny.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, and like the bard, he has runes that he has to memorize. And in combat, or in sometimes other places, but in combat, if he knows the rune, then he'll know something about this monster that could help them, like an immunity or a special attack you could use against it, that kind of thing. So once you're all trained up and you've got your character all equipped, then you actually go into the adventure. And the rooms are generally either combat or a puzzle room. In the combat, we'll have like an NPC in a cool costume. Sometimes we have big animatronic monsters like a dragon or a giant that you fight. And there's a DM in there that helps you adjudicate the combat. You can take damage, or you can sometimes find things in there that'll help you. Puzzle rooms, again, there will be a DM or an NPC in there that'll help you. It's usually a group puzzle because there's 10 people in the room. We want to make sure everybody's having fun, so everybody's engaged. It takes all 10, hopefully, to complete the puzzle in the 12 minutes that you have in there. And that's pretty much it. You just wander through the adventure, and then time you get to the end, you hope you survive. If you survive, you get a cool button that says survivor. At the end, then you leave, go to the epilogue room, and you get to pull out some random treasure. Usually it's 3 random treasure tokens. It could be anything from a scroll tube to a really, really super rare, uber rare magic item like a +5 sword.
So Addicted to Cards asked a question, and it got answered in the chat, but I'm going, because the chat goes away afterwards, I'm going to ask you so someone that watches later can. He wants to know about, can you use the tokens each year?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. There's still people that use wooden tokens. Originally they were wooden tokens from 2004. They still use them. But some of them know if they're a one-shot thing, we want to make it cool. So if you use a potion, you have to turn it in to use it, or a scroll, usually you have to turn that in. But a lot of the items are permanent, and we've never really destroyed an item. We had a rust monster one year where basically we said, well, you can't use your weapon for that room. I think some of the hardcore people actually burn their real item, but we didn't ask them to. They just volunteered to do that. But yeah, definitely you want to keep your gear. I mean, that's what you should do.
So you get souvenirs, or if you decide to play again, you've upgraded.
Yeah, and it's that was one of the really cool parts about the whole token. The only reason I did tokens is because you want cool gear. We didn't actually have it the first time we did it. There weren't any tokens, but the later on that year we went out to Gen Con SoCal and we decided to do tokens because we wanted, one of the quintessential things in D&D is you find treasure, you have cool stuff, and so I wanted to add that element in, and we did. But it's really cool. There's this huge token trading community out there where, hey, I like to play cleric, so I want to collect stuff that clerics can use. And so you'll trade your stuff away to get that with people that are looking for stuff for rangers or paladins or whatever. So it's pretty fun. And it gives the community something to do between conventions, trade tokens, and talk about all that.
So do you have a warehouse now with giants and dragons in it somewhere?
We do, actually. We have a workshop that's got some stuff in it, and then we rent some space at this warehouse nearby that's just full of stuff. Sometimes we reskin the stuff. Sometimes we trade it to we're kind of attached somewhat to the haunt industry because of all the special effects and animatronics we use. So I've traded with haunters. We've traded this animatronic we've used once for another one. We're actually going to go in a couple of weeks to the big haunt show in St. Louis, where we'll look to see what's the latest in costumes and animatronics and makeup and that kind of stuff. It's pretty cool.
I'm just guessing you guys must have like one of the coolest houses on your block for Halloween.
Yeah, when the kids were younger, I put a lot of effort into making something cool. We'd have like a cave in the garage. It turned into a cave, and with a bunch of fog and monsters and that kind of thing. Now that they're all not trick or treating anymore, really don't do much. But yeah, it was fun when they were little.
So let's see. Someone just asked. Two-Eyed Jack. No, that's not the one I was looking for. Okay, Robert wants to know, where is this happening? I think we've mentioned it a couple times, but it's worth saying again. What's the lineup for the year?
Yeah. The adventuring season starts at Gen Con in Indianapolis, and then we'll be going to Gamehole Con in November. We'll probably be going to PAX again in January, which is PAX South, which is in San Antonio, and which is in June in Columbus. So we'll probably add one more show sometime next year. We're talking to different people. We'll see what happens.
Nice. And Addicted to Cards has a great question. Where do you think True Dungeon will be in 5 or 10 years?
Someplace I have no idea. That's the only thing I know for sure. I have no idea where it's going to be in 5 to 10 years. I wish I could say there's like this huge grand plan, but there isn't. It's just I'm just having fun, and you know, it's it'd be smart if I had some big 5 to 10 year plan, but I'm not that smart, and I'm having too much fun to worry about it. So we'll get there. We'll see what happens. I have no idea. I mean, it would have been cool if like the kids would have taken over. You know, I've got a 16-year-old son that I thought it'd been cool if maybe he could take it over someday, but he has other interests, which is cool. I wouldn't want to take over the old man's job or business anyway. So that's
Are your
cool.
kids gamers?
Not some. My son's more of an electronic gamer. He does some stuff on tabletop, but uh, yeah, he's a huge musician. He plays bass, so that's all he eats, sleeps bass guitar. He's awesome at it, by the way.
Hey, it doesn't matter as long as it's passionate about something, right? I
Right.
I
Yep.
got 2 kids. I'm 1 for 2, so one's into it, one's not.
Yeah. Yeah. We've done family game night stuff. That's been fun. But because the kids are, I've got 11-year-old daughter, 16-year-old son, and they are diametrically opposed to having any kind of fun in the same room unless it's a convertible. Other than that, they just don't want to do that kind of thing together.
I have a 17-year-old son and a 13-year-old daughter, so they're fairly close there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's I wish they like to have more fun together, but there's this rivalry thing I can't get them out of. But oh well.
hey, as a parent, as a fellow parent, like it's a good day when they're not trying to kill each other.
Right.
So,
Yeah, they get along really well as long as we're not in the room. Yeah,
yeah.
that's we hear that from every people. Oh, they get along so well. Drake's so nice to Avery. I'm like, not when we're in there, he isn't. But he's a great brother to her when we're not around. So
It's a step in the right direction. Have you ever
yeah.
considered going into different genres?
We actually did early in our years. The second year, Upper Deck Entertainment, they had this card game called Versus, and it was themed to the Marvel Universe. And me being a big comic book nerd growing up, they asked, "You want to do like a true type event based on our card game?" And I was like, "Do I get to use the official Marvel IP?" And they said yes. And I said, "I'm in," because I wanted to do a venture with Thor and the Avengers and all that. So we did a couple. We called it True Heroes, and it was a comic book based thing. It was really fun. It was really cool. A lot of work. It was silly to really put that much work into it, but it was a live action comic book. How can you not? Right? You get to use the Marvel stuff. So we made these really cool, like um, 3D or a 3D, but full color printed walls that look like they were right out of a comic book. We had a great local artist that could make amazing art, Daryl Jones, and you walked in the room and it looked like you were in a comic book strip, and you get to interact with some interesting, more modern type puzzles with like touch screens and that kind of thing. So it was a lot of fun. But eventually, their budget for that kind of went down because it was really expensive to do all this. The printing at the time was real expensive to mount big 4x8 sheets of full color prints, and eventually it went away because we just didn't have the funding for it.
Yeah, as soon as you mentioned it, that's the name that jumped into my head,
Yeah,
True Hero. So,
cool.
we seem to be on the same wavelength there.
Yeah.
Do you remember the Marvel Superheroes RPG?
Oh yeah, I remember when it came out. I played. Yeah, I think I probably played it the first week it came out. I wanted to, the whole. I remember the incredible, amazing, monstrous, unearthly, whatever it was. All those. The D100 system was a really cool system. It was really easy, and I thought it was a good system. It was much less complicated than AD&D at the time, and it seemed to fit the genre where you could just improvise and do a lot of crazy stuff, like pick up a mailbox and throw it at somebody. That kind of
Yeah,
thing.
Jeff Grubb and Steve Winters did a great job with that one.
Yeah, I
We
agree.
actually still play it. We stream that game once a
Oh
week.
yeah, cool. Yeah, I was involved in the RPGA at that time. I was a I wrote a module. They played it at Gen Con, and it was all I got to make up all new original characters because why use somebody else's characters? So I made up 6 characters, and they ran it. It got published in the RPGA Polyhedron too. Um, but the coolest part was they said because of our license with Marvel, you have to agree that Marvel owns these characters if we're going to publish it. And I'm like, cool. That's awesome. I can just say that Marvel
I made a
owns.
Marvel superhero, sort of.
Right. Now they've never done anything with it, and they probably don't even know that they own it. But I can honestly say Marvel bought or didn't buy, but said Marvel acquired 6 of my characters. So I got that going for me.
It's a fairly rare claim to fame.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we're playing an ongoing series now, and I guess this is our season 2. Season 1, we kind of played ourselves, sucked into the Marvel universe, and then
Cool.
discovered
Vigil-
powers.
I think that was how Villains and Vigilantes was back in the day. You were supposed to make your alter ego up based on yourself, I believe. That was cool.
Yeah, it was definitely a fun game to play. It's not my preferred style. I prefer to just make up a hero. I find it so much harder to role play myself playing a game than I
Sure.
do, just inventing a character.
Yeah.
Plus, it's weird too. Like we got stuck in like some bank robbery. I'm like, I'm not getting shot. If I'm role playing myself, I wouldn't want to get shot.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
When I role play someone else, it can be much more heroic.
Yes, much easier. Yeah.
So, are you guys getting much gaming in?
Well, we try to game once a week with the old group. We've been getting together 30 years, some of us. Yeah, we try to get together once a week. The game, maybe you can see behind me, we get together every Monday, and it's an old Avalon Hill game from the 70s called The Rise and Decline of Third Reich. It's an old war game, and been playing it since the early 80s, so off and on. The last time we really played this was like 8 years ago, but I mean, this really cool map that's mounted on a magnet steel. We use magnets, and it's a lot of fun.
30 years. That's a pretty impressive time to keep a. It's a pretty impressive time to keep amount of time just to keep a group of friends together, let alone a group of friends that
Yeah.
meet once a week.
Actually, I think it's been 35 years. Yeah, I'm getting old. 35 years. Yeah. Yeah, they're great guys. I'm lucky. I moved to high school, new one, when I was in the middle of my sophomore year, and I was pretty much done with high school by the time I hit junior. It was really kind of lame, and I happened to meet these guys that were like in college, and they seemed much more my style, and hung out with them and have been hanging out with them ever since.
So, do you just do True Dungeon now full time? It sounds like it would be a full time job.
Yeah, yeah. I did it kind of part time for a long time. I used to run a company called Dwarven Forge for like 10 years, and then eventually I moved on and I just do this now. Yep, 24/7.
Oh, I didn't realize you were also a part of Dwarven Forge either.
Yeah, that
Awesome.
was a whole lot of fun. That's a whole other thing. Yeah, that was 10 years of craziness there.
Cool. So, what did you do for Dwarven Forge?
Yes.
Uh,
No, I was their only employee, so I did everything. I was the guy that did it all. So
were you involved with the sculpts and stuff like that, or did you handle more of like the business side?
I was in, yeah, I did a lot of the product development too. We um, worked with that Daryl Jones guy I talked about earlier, who had done really cool comic book stuff, and we would work together. And he was a great illustrator. He could illustrate really well, and we would send then those ideas on to Stefan, and he would sculpt them, or other folks would. It was great. It was a lot of fun. It was, again, I was like a really lucky nerd there to be able to do that. So yeah, been lucky.
So, there's a question from Aaron Parks I'll address real quick. They do not use like foam weapons, kind of like you would in a LARP. They have a system like designed for all the specific tasks that a class would do, whether you're
Right.
casting spells or picking locks or
Yeah.
doing combat.
Yeah, I wanted to make it as accessible as possible. I didn't want anybody. I mean, we consciously make a choice on everything. We try to make sure like somebody in a wheelchair could come in and have a great time and have great experience. A few times we've had things where wheelchair may not be able to get through, and we've always had walkarounds type things. So yeah, I wanted to make it as fun as possible for as many people as possible. So it's designed that way.
So so right from the beginning, you guys had designed with accessibility in mind.
Yeah, the shuffleboard system to me seemed like a great way. Almost anybody, could go up there, and if they didn't, if that was something that they couldn't physically do, they could do one of the mental tasks. We have the rogue boxes are all battery powered, so people can actually take them off the pedestal we have them on, put them in their lap if they need to, or they could be a spellcaster and just have to, point to something like on the planar chart, like where the plane of fire is, or they just, they can identify what this leaf is that the DM's holding up as like a sassafras. So yeah, almost anybody can play. It's a really fun event for a lot of folks.
Which is really cool. I think your nerd cred shot up even more when you mentioned running Dwarven Forge for a decade as well.
Yeah, it was a crazy time. We did a couple Kickstarters too, which was nuts at the time. Um, but yeah, it was fun. When I took over, it was sold in stores, the traditional 3-tier model. But the margins were so thin because the stuff was so expensive and heavy to ship and everything that it was not going to work. And we went to them. We were like one of the first people to sell direct to customers. We decided that way we didn't have to worry about our main customer being distributors. It's actually going to be the end user. So it allowed us some more artistic freedom. We didn't have to get stuff that they thought would sell well. We just worried about what was really cool. And we started with the Den of Evil set. We wanted to make this really cool, evil looking set. And we took pre-orders and it did really well. And it allowed the company to make some really cool sets over the years that I'm really happy with, and they're still being used today.
So Brian Smith, have you ever had to kick people out like for getting a little too tipsy in the tavern or getting buck wild?
Yeah, we've had a few things. Luckily, like I was telling you that we're adjacent to the haunt space, and those guys have horror stories because most of their people are there to get rowdy and have a good time. They're teenagers, where we're like the exact opposite. We have the best customer base on earth. Gamers are like the nicest people. Sometimes they have a little bit too much to drink and get a little loud, and we've had to do a few things, but it's been extremely rare. So I've been real happy. It allows us to do sets that don't have to be nearly as strong and sturdy as, like, say, if you were building a haunt.
So in the chat, Lori with the last name looks remarkably similar to your own.
Don't listen to her.
Jeff keeps referring to Daryl in past tense, but for the record, Daryl is still alive and kicking as an amazing illustrator and is still working.
He is. And actually, I'm going to put in a plug. He has a Kickstarter coming up in like 7 weeks called the Daubers, Dobers, I think. Yeah, he's illustrated this amazing like card game. He's done all the stuff, all the design, everything. It looks amazing. So check it out.
So Two-Eyed Jack, and also if he's interested, he could always come on here and talk about it.
Sure.
We last week we had a run of Kickstarters. I feel bad for the audience too sometimes because there's just so much cool stuff out there to buy.
Yeah, no kidding. Like I said, I remember growing up in the '80s, and you'd go to the hobby store and you'd see the same thing like a year later, and it's the same crappy games. Now it's like every week a new game comes in. It's crazy. It's a great time.
So Jeff Chandler has a really good question. Do you get to see the end of the dungeon if you die in game?
How we handle death. Good question. We used to have a guy dressed in death robes that if you died like in room 4 or 5, he would come and escort you out. I thought that was like the hardcore cool way to do it, and it was until the ticket price started going up and up and up, and then I started feeling bad. Somebody spent a lot of money, and so now what we do is you become a ghost, and you can just follow your group if you die all the way to the end. We do have a few magic items that allow people to interact with you. Like that, we have you can speak with dead sometimes, and so if you're in the final room and you want some help, the ghost people could actually like give some feedback on how to solve the puzzle. So that's how it works now.
It's funny. James Leslie in the chat is Dave. I can't afford many more Kickstarter weeks. We had, like I said, I think it was last week. It was like every one of them was a Kickstarter except for one, and they had a Kickstarter coming up, in the near future.
Sure,
just worked that way. But yeah, I mean, it's like you said, it's a great time to be alive. We have so many more options. Before, you were lucky if you had a store where you could even shop for this stuff. Now,
right? Yep.
The whole world is open up to us.
Yeah, online, and then even in game stores. We've got a really good game store here in Carbondale, and yeah, just walking in there is amazing just to see what's available. It used to be you had Dungeons and Dragons and Avalon Hill that put out one a game a year maybe, and now it's just every week there's something else to look at.
So it's not really a question; it's more of a comment. But it's got me thinking here. Two-Eyed Jack, it usually sells out pretty quick at Gen Con. Origins last year had tickets available during the con. As the con communities for the game grow, it will get harder to get tickets. Do you have any thoughts towards that as far as going into the future? Like, knowing that, like, you've got a limited number of people that you can run through these?
Yeah, I mean, like at PAX South, we sold out, which was crazy since that was like really the first year we've ever really done any adventuring there. So it kind of depends on the size of the con and the community, but yeah, what's nice about it is the more people play, more people want to volunteer, so that allows us to grow the event more. So at Origins, we've got a huge space that they've agreed to give us. So we could grow Origins. The more players we get, the more volunteers, the more adventures we could add. So Origins could someday be, the size of Gen Con in a short number of years if we're able to find the players that want to volunteer. And a lot of people that love the event so much they want to be a part of like making it happen, and they still can play too. We arrange it so there's always play time. But yeah, sky's the limit on some of these. The only real limiter is the volunteer and the space. But at most of the places that we have plenty of space. It's just we don't have enough volunteers. So volunteer.
There you go.
TDVols.com. All right, that's the plug.
There it is. Well, so how does volunteering work? And let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, I think we have a great program. Like at Gen Con, you get a free badge, which is like $110 if you're full time or part time. If you're full time, you also get like a $250 stipend if you're like a combat DM or a coach, and you also get a spot in a hotel room downtown. Four people to a room, and that saves a lot of your money. And then you get a T-shirt and a limited edition token that only volunteers get. But it's basically a way to go to Gen Con for free, including paying for your True Dungeon ticket and having a great time. And that's why a lot of people do it. We had almost 300 volunteers last year to help run Gen Con.
And how much time does a volunteer spend running, doing the volunteer stuff?
Yeah, they have depends on the con. We kind of have different schedules. Like at Gen Con, they'll work like 8-9 hour shift, and then they have the rest of the day off to do whatever they want. True Dungeon pretty much runs like 20 hours a day, so they can always play outside that. But they'll have to run Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at Gen Con. They come in for like an hour or two on Sunday morning and help tear down, but they get the rest of Sunday off. And they actually get their hotel room starts Wednesday, so they can come in Wednesday afternoon, have fun in the city, mess around. We have like a couple hours of training Wednesday night. They can go out and have fun. And then they show up Thursday, Friday, and Saturday and work a shift. So, and then most people will be out of there by noon on Sunday, and they can go to the exhibit hall for another 5 hours if they want.
Cool. I mean, it's not a bad deal. I went to Gen Con for the first time last year, and it's not cheap. I think.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We definitely like to take care of the volunteers. They're the reason we get to have it. So it's we have a pretty nice package for them.
We had someone put us up, and I got press passes, and I think it was still like $600. So
Yeah.
and it was a pain in the ass, like the commuting in every day and finding a place to park.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why the people like the downtown hotel rooms that we have. We're like attached to by a hamster tube type thing. So you never even have to go outside. If you're a volunteer, you can just cross right into Gen Con over the hamster tube. We're at the Crown Plaza, which is a really nice hotel.
Yeah,
we also have another one, but
this year I actually got one of the downtown. I just got lucky in the lottery, I guess. It was actually the downtown Marriott.
Sure.
One of my friends was so pissed because he couldn't get anywhere near there. I signed up for the lottery just assuming I wasn't going to get it.
Sure.
and I almost forgot to go to jump in during my slot, and jumped in late. And I was like, oh, I actually have a couple choices here. And I had looked at prices prior to Gen Con. I'm like, what if I just go and look and get my own room? What does that cost? And it was over $600 a night.
Yeah, it's crazy, and they have people paying it because they want to stay downtown. But now with the Uber stuff or Lyft, it's so easy, or a lot easier now, just to stay outside of downtown. And I know a guy who's like, hey, I'd rather stay outside. It's cheaper, and all I have to do is walk to the nearest curb, and a Lyft guy will pick me up and take me to the front door of my hotel out by the airport. So it's actually faster and a lot less walking than to walk, a couple blocks to my downtown hotel.
Yeah, so that is actually true. For us, it's a little trickier because we usually travel with gear. So it's like, you at the very least, you need to have a car in order to stash your stuff.
Yep.
So with that, we're just past the hour mark, and I want to thank you for coming on, Jeff. It's been great talking to you.
Great. I apologize for the audio issues. I don't know what happened. It's the negative ion field I have around me.
Possibly. No worries, man. If that's the worst thing that happens today, my life is good.
Okay,
and
thanks.
Everyone else, I want to thank you for hanging out with us. Really appreciate it. So until next time, stay nerdy.